So today I wanted to talk a little bit about when you might need listed building consent and even what listed building consent is. What we find is that people often buy a listed building, don't quite understand the particulars, and think that they can start removing things. So the key thing with a listed building is that you need planning permission to do almost anything, even if it's on the inside. So it's just a slight shift away from normal planning permission where you kind of can consider the outside. But with a listed building, you also need to get permission to make changes to the inside. Now, so what kind of changes would fall into that? For example, if you're putting in a new bathroom, would you need listed building consent for that? Some local authorities will say no. Now, our view on this is that if there is some heritage value to that existing bathroom, for example, if there is a fireplace in the bathroom, then it is likely that you may need listed building consent to demonstrate that you are not ripping out any old fabric to the building. And equally, if you're taking down walls or changing the purpose of a room, you may well need listed building consent. And in some rooms, you might find there is an existing bathroom and you've got really tall skirtings. So if you were taking those off to put tiled skirtings in, again, you're likely to need listed building consent. And it's just getting that balance right between what can you do to a listed building without needing consent. And often the best safeguard for that is to get consent from the local authority, or at least speak to the heritage officer at the council to define what they will and won't need consent for. Because the problem with a listed building is if you don't get consent for it, all of the works on the inside that you're doing, then fundamentally it's a criminal offence. So simple things like you might think, well, I just want to change the radiators. Well, you're likely to going to need consent for that. You may want to put underfloor heating in to be a bit more efficient, or insulation on the inside of your property. Again, you need listed building consent for that. So just be really, really wary. We've had instances local to us on listed buildings that we work on where the council has even asked us for what type of tiles we're putting in and around the fireplace to make sure that they are of the heritage fabric of the original building. And as part of that, you sort of think you really need to think about the detail. We've done listed buildings where we've had to sort of draw the detail around the skirtings and the cornice to make sure that they're going to be preserved. Details around the doors to make sure that any new doors are going to be exactly the same as the originals. And the key with the listed building is the more information you provide, the more satisfied the local authority are going to be. And as I said it before, you don't want to get caught out with making changes to a listed building that do not have consent for. So if you are ever in doubt about it, we would always recommend getting consent, however small it might seem. In some listed buildings, even sort of changing the paint or the type of paint that's being used may be considered sort of degrading the original fabric. That's quite rare, but nonetheless, you don't want to be taking away the harm. One of the things that you must bear in mind that with listed buildings, you're almost like a guardian of the building for the long term, and therefore it's your duty to preserve it in its best sort of way. And the more you do that, the more you retain the sort of inherent value of the building. So it's just getting that balance right around what is allowed, what isn't allowed, and making sure that you're covered. So as I said, if in doubt, make an application for a listed building, and you might not need planning permission, but you may need listed building consent for the internal changes.